Hi guys, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be sharing all the books that I want to read this fall. I am such a seasonal reader, so the way I film TBRs on my channel is by season. It just makes the most sense to my brain when I'm planning out what I want to read to do it seasonally as opposed to doing it monthly. So that's what we're going to be doing today. As always, this TBR is very ambitious, very extensive. There's some books from last year's fall TBR that I didn't get to, so they are carrying over into this year's TBR. I have divided it up by category and genre to make everything a little bit less chaotic. Last thing I want to mention before we get into talking about the books is I do apologize if some of my synopsises for these books are very vague. A lot of these books I don't know a ton about. Obviously I've never read them, but it does not take a lot to convince me to add a book to my TBR. Sometimes it's as little as someone whose opinion I trust recommending it, and I don't have to know anything about the plot at all for me to want to read it. And sometimes I have other very niche reasons for wanting to read a book during a certain time of year. So with that being said, get cozy and let's get into my fall TBR. The first category I will be prioritizing this fall is dark academia. Dark academia is probably my favorite subgenre to read during the fall. I just love a college campus setting. Usually dark academias have very interesting dynamic characters, and there's always a really great subplot of suspense. The first dark academia book I'm planning to read this fall is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. This is carrying over from last fall into this year, so it is definitely going to be top priority this October. This one follows a group of friends in two timelines. In the past, we see them in college, and there was a murder surrounding the friend group, and then in the present day, they are at a college reunion, and a bunch of secrets about the murder are starting to come out. I feel like everyone who reads this book loves it, so I am very excited for it. The next dark academia I want to read is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This one I feel gets compared the most to The Secret History, which I read last fall. So this one was a carryover from last fall as well, but I just didn't want to read it back to back with The Secret History if it was that similar. But this one again is following a friend group at a college, but I think the college they go to is a theater school, specifically a Shakespeare theater school, which sounds very interesting, and I think they're putting on this play. There's also a murder in the friend group and lots of secrets, so it sounds very dark, very twisty, and I'm so excited for something similar to The Secret History. Another dark academia I am planning to read is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This one is a chunky boy, but I've heard the best things about this book as well. I'm a little bit intimidated by it because it sounds like a very literary masterpiece, smart person type of book, and sometimes that's just not me. If I really have to turn on my brain and think about a book, sometimes I'm kind of checked out, but I've heard such good things about it, so I just really want to give it a try. I believe this one has some fantasy elements to it, and our main character is studying linguistics at Oxford University. I've heard there's really great commentary on language and colonialism and race in here. I'm really excited though to give this one a try, and I'm hoping that I love it. The last dark academia I have is Ace of Spades. I bought this pretty recently. It was in my most recent book haul video that I posted, so you might have seen it in that. But this one's following two academic rivals who are kind of battling it out to be valedictorian, and then there's some anonymous person releasing all this blackmail on both of them to try and ruin their reputations. This is another one I've heard has great social commentary on race, so I'm excited to add it to the list of dark academias I want to read this fall. I have a few thrillers, of course, that I want to read this fall for spooky season. The first one is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. I have heard so many great reviews of this book, and I actually picked it up earlier this year and read a few pages and found out early on it takes place in October, so I was like, nope, I'm gonna save it for fall. This one follows this mother who is looking out the window and happens to see her son stab this stranger, and then when she wakes up, it's the day before the murder, and she's constantly reliving this day trying to stop her son from killing this person, and it sounds really, really interesting. I love the time travel element to it. I'm excited to read it this fall. The next thriller I've been wanting to read for a while, but I've been saving it for spooky season, and that is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This one follows a married couple who live in the suburbs, and they are seemingly so normal, aside from the fact that their hobby that they like to do together is murdering people. And I've heard really, really great reviews about this book. Everyone seems to love it. I see it recommended all the time when people are doing like thriller recommendation videos. I definitely wanted to add it to the spooky season TBR. The last thriller I'm wanting to read is a very new release. It is Lisa Jewell's latest book, None of This Is True. I've been hearing so many good reviews for this book. I've seen so many people give it 5 stars, and the premise sounds so interesting. Basically, it follows these two women who are in this restaurant, and they're both celebrating their 40th 45th birthdays that night, and one of the women is this famous podcaster, and the other woman comes up to her and is like, oh my gosh, you're celebrating your 45th birthday? I am too, we're birthday twins. And this podcaster hosts women on her show who are very successful and talks about how they got to where they are today. And the woman is talking to this podcaster and she's like, I'm not successful yet, but I'm making some very big changes in my life, and it would be really interesting for your podcast to document my journey. And the podcaster is kind of like weirded out by her, I think, but also intrigued, and that just sounds so interesting to me. I've only read one Lisa Jewell book, and while I didn't love it, it did intrigue me to read more from her because I know she's a very popular thriller author, so I definitely want to give her latest one a try with how interesting it sounds and all the good reviews it's getting. I have a couple horror novels that I want to read this fall. The first one is another carryover from last fall, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This one takes place in the 1950s in Mexico, and we're following this woman whose cousin just got married, and she receives a letter from the cousin, and it sounds like she is in danger. So she goes to check on her cousin and make sure everything is good, and when she gets there, I think the husband seems a little creepy, and the house that they're in seems a little creepy as well, and just mysterious things start going down. And the vibes and the setting of this one just sound so eerie, so perfect for fall. This is one I've definitely been saving to read this season, and I'm prioritizing it since it is a carryover from last year. And the other horror novel I want to read is Tender is the Flesh. This is one that is super popular and I've heard a lot of good things about as well. This one is kind of a dystopian horror, I think, because it takes place in a future where this virus infects animals, so humans are not able to eat any meat without getting poisoned, so they result to cannibalism. It just sounds so creepy. It's so crazy to think about if like that actually happened, and I've heard there's a crazy twist in this book, so it's definitely one that I want to read during spooky season. I have a good bit of fantasy that I want to read this fall. Prioritizing this bad boy, Fourth Wing. I'm probably the last person on earth to have read this yet, but everyone is singing its praises and it is so hyped, so I have to know if it's worth the hype. I definitely want to do some kind of reading vlog with this book, so stay tuned for that and for my thoughts. I'm excited for this one, but nervous with how much hype it's getting. All I really know about this book is that we're following a girl at this school, and there are dragons, and there's a romance in here, and this gets compared to Game of Thrones and Harry Potter and Divergent and the Hunger Games, so that's all I really want to know, and I'm intrigued and excited and a little bit nervous because I'm hoping that it lives up to the hype. Similarly, another fantasy I want to read that's getting a ton of hype, I'm pretty sure it's a YA fantasy, is Divine Rivals. All I really know about this book is that we have these two rivals. I think they both work for the same newspaper, and somehow they end up with this magic typewriter, and letters mysteriously are getting sent to one another, and I think there's like a war going on, and there's some kind of magic system involving gods and goddesses. I don't know, it doesn't sound like my usual type of book that I would be intrigued to pick up, but with all the hype that this book is getting and people saying that it's not their usual thing and they liked it, that convinces me enough to read it. I also want to read Piranesi. This one sounds kind of like a fantastical, whimsical kind of story following this man named Piranesi, and he lives in this house that has all these secret mazes, and somehow one day he discovers someone else is living in the house with him, and I think they're trying to figure out what is going on in the house with all the mazes. The next fantasy I want to read has been on my TBR for multiple years now, and I definitely want to make this the year that I finally pick it up, and that is The Night Circus. I know this one follows a magical circus where it just randomly will pop up at different locations and times, and we follow these two dueling magicians, and I think there's also a romance between them. It just sounds like the perfect cozy kind of book to read on a fall night when it's like raining out and stormy. It just sounds so atmospheric and magical. The next book I want to read is Manacled, and this is actually a fan fiction. It's a Hermione fan fiction, so Draco, Hermione from Harry Potter, and it tells the story of what would have happened after Harry Potter if Voldemort and his army had won the war. And I'm not even someone who was like shipping Draco and Hermione that hard when I was reading Harry Potter, but I've just heard so many good things about this fan fiction, and since it is Harry Potter fan fiction, it's not available to be purchased. I think you can read it for free on the author's website, and I think it's really long, but everyone says that it's so worth it and it's so good, and that's coming from like really hardcore Harry Potter fans. I trust people's opinions, and I really want to find out for myself what this this book is like. I've heard it's kind of like The Handmaid's Tale, and I think Hermione like belongs to Draco, so I don't know, I'm kind of scared to read it, but I'm also so intrigued. Moving into romance, the first romance I want to read this fall is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I think this one came out last year and people were absolutely loving it, but it didn't sound like it would be for me. I have heard more and more really great things about it, and I know Ashley Poston just came out with her newest book, The 7-Year Slip, and that one does sound more up my alley and people are absolutely loving that book. So I really want to give Dead Romantics a try first before I read her newer book, especially since it sounds perfect for spooky season. I know it follows our main character who is a ghostwriter, and I think she ends up having a romance with a ghost. It just sounds like something lighter and fun for spooky season and kind of a different take on a romance. I also want to read The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling this fall. This is the book that comes after The X-Hex, which I read last fall, and it was super cute. Really enjoyed it in between my scarier books. It was something nice and light to read before I went to bed. This one follows Vivi from book one's cousin Gwen, who we were introduced to in the first book, and I think she has a romance with one of the brothers from book one as well. I think it's the older brother Wells, so I'm really excited to revisit that same world. I don't really know what the storyline is following, but I'm really excited to have familiar characters and that familiar setting that was so perfect to read around Halloween time. I also want to give Mariana Zapata another try and read The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. This one I've been saving for fall because it's a football romance and I always associate football with the fall. I know this one is a very slow burn in true MZ fashion, and I think our male character is a football player who I believe is Canadian and he needs citizenship to play in the US, and so it becomes this fake marriage situation with his assistant, I think, and he is a very grumpy guy and the only person he will give even the slightest time of day to is his assistant, and then we follow their romance, very slow burn romance. The next romance I would like to read is Layla by Colleen Hoover. I haven't read a Coho book in so long and her books are just so bingeable and I kind of miss them. I feel like I fly through them and I always enjoy them. Layla is a romance where I think Layla was in some kind of accident, so her boyfriend ends up taking her to this bed and breakfast to kind of rekindle their relationship, but when he's there he ends up meeting another guest and falling for her, and then it becomes this love triangle situation. And I think there's a paranormal aspect to this book, which is why I think it's good for fall time. I've also heard people say that this book of hers is the most similar to Verity, which is one of my favorite books, so definitely want to give this one a try this fall. There are 3 new release romance books coming out in October that I am so excited about. I think about these books all the time and I want to do a reading vlog, doing like a new release romance reading vlog, because these books are so highly anticipated for me. The first one comes out I think October 3rd and it is Wildfire by Hannah Grace. This is the sequel to Icebreaker and we're following another hockey player named Russ, and he has a one-night stand with a girl named Aurora, and then they reconnect later because they're both camp counselors at the same summer camp. I mentioned this in another video, but I wish it was coming out in the summer because that setting just sounds ideal for the summertime, but I know I'm gonna have to read it as soon as it comes out because I just cannot wait for it. The next new release romance coming out that I am so excited for is Caught Up by Liz Tom Ford. This is the 3rd book in her Windy City series. I loved the first 2 books in the series so much, and this one I am so excited for. It is a baseball romance. We follow an MLB player named Kai, and it's also single dad nanny romance, which normally are tropes that I don't like at all, but with how much I loved Heartless earlier this year that had those tropes, I feel like I still am going to absolutely love it because I loved the other books in the series and I absolutely love Liz Tom Ford's writing. So I am so excited for Caught Up. And the 3rd new release that I cannot wait for and I'm also kind of sad about is Hopeless by Elsie Silver. This is the final book in the Chestnut Springs series. I'm so excited to get Beau's story, but I'm also sad that the series is wrapping up and coming to an end because I have just enjoyed my time reading those books so much, but I'm equally as excited to get another book and read it. Also, in the spirit of spooky season, I have been saving this duet for the fall time because it is a dark romance and I would like to read Haunting and Hunting Adeline. I don't know too much about this one, but I think it follows a stalker and I've heard it has a lot of trigger warnings. I don't think I've ever read a dark romance before, and this is definitely one I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on, but it's one of those ones that I just have to know for myself what it's like, and I feel like spooky season is the perfect time to pick it up. And lastly, I have quite a few series that I want to at least start this fall. The first 3 are some OG series. Some of them I have read before and I want to reread because they give me fall vibes, and some of them I've never read before and I'm probably like one of the only people who haven't read it, so I just want to give it a try. The first series I really want to reread is the Harry Potter series. I said that I'm going to start the reread with book 2 because I read book 1 last fall, intending to reread all 7 books last fall, and that just didn't happen. I read book 1 and just didn't have time to pick up the rest of the series, but I'm not going to read book 1 again because I know that story like the back of my hand. So starting with book 2, I would like to reread all the way through book 7 this fall. The Harry Potter series is my favorite series of all time. It's the series that got me into reading, and I haven't done a reread of it in quite a while, and I feel like the fall time is just the perfect time to do it. The next series I want to reread is Twilight. I honestly never really was the biggest Twilight person, but I don't know, I feel like I want to do a reread of it. I know Midnight Sun came out pretty recently, which I never read, and also I saw on Goodreads, I don't know how accurate this is, but I think Stephenie Meyer is writing 2 more books in the series, which I had no idea she was planning to continue on with the series. I thought it was kind of over with. It is one I would like to reread in the fall because I feel like Twilight is just the ultimate fall vibes. And of course I want to do a rewatch of the movies because they're just so iconic and perfect for this time of year. The next OG series I would like to read is The Hunger Games. I actually never read this series at all, even back in the day when it was super popular. My brother gave me the box set, which I have somewhere. I think it's in my mom's house. I need to get it, but this is one I feel like I can save for like later in the fall, maybe in November. I saw the first Hunger Games movie and that's it, but I feel like there's so many books now that get compared to the Hunger Games, and I hear so many Hunger Games references that I'm like, okay, I really need to read the series to understand all the references. I also would like to read the Caraval trilogy by Stephanie Garber. This one sounds similar to the Night Circus, where there's like this island and I think this magical carnival circus type thing pops up once a year, and I think we're following the relationship between these 2 sisters trying to go to the carnival. And one thing I've learned recently that I absolutely love in books is sister relationships. So these books just sound very whimsical and very magical, and my main reason for wanting to read this fall is because I also would like to read the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber. It takes place in the same world, and I know everyone says that you don't have to read the Caraval trilogy first, but I'm the kind of person, if you tell me that another series comes before it and this one's like a spin-off and it takes place in the same world, the way my brain works, I still have to read Caraval first. I don't really know the specifics of what Once Upon a Broken Heart is about. I know it's YA, it sounds very magical and whimsical, and I think there's a romance in there, but all I know is that the BookTube girlies absolutely loved it. I've heard so many great reviews for it, and I definitely want to give it a try. I feel like it's one that could end up being a new favorite for me. I also want to read the Inheritance Games trilogy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I only had book 1 last fall, and I remember book 3 had just come out, but the paperback wasn't out, so I was waiting for the paperback of book 3 to come out, and now I have all 3 of them in paperback, so I definitely am planning to read them this fall. I know this follows a girl who ends up getting a letter that she has received an inheritance from someone that she doesn't know, and when she ends up going to the reading of the will, the whole family doesn't know her, she doesn't know them. They're like, why did she get some of our inheritance and we didn't? And then there's all these riddles they have to solve, and there's a love triangle. I know Jennifer Lynn Barnes' other series, The Naturals, has been getting a lot of hype this year, so I'm interested to read her most popular and then move into some of her other series, of course, if I like this one. I also want to continue on with the Truly Devious series. This is book 2, The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is another one I purchased recently. It was in my most recent book haul video, but I love this series so much. It's a YA murder mystery series following a student named Stevie Bell at this boarding school. She's trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the boarding school's founder's wife and daughter because they were kidnapped years earlier, and it was never really resolved what actually happened to them. I really want to read the Red Zone Rivals series this fall by Candy Steiner. It is on Kindle Unlimited, and they are football romances. Again, football is just something I've always associated with the fall time. I think there's currently 4 books out. The first one is Fair Catch, and then I know the second one is Blindside. That one seems to be the fan favorite. The way it's described, the plot sounds very similar to The Deal, so I'm always down for a good sports romance series. Kind of sounds like it's going to be the football version of the Off-Campus series. And then finally, I would like to read the Devil's Night series by Penelope Douglas. I think these are considered dark romance, but I know they're following 4 boys that call themselves the 4 Horsemen, and it takes place around Halloween time. I think the night before Halloween, they go around town and they're like terrorizing the town. This is one I've heard mixed things on, but I don't know, I'm just so intrigued, and it takes place around Halloween time, so I really want to give it a try and at least start it this fall. And those are all the books currently on my fall TBR. I feel like I've been talking forever. I'm losing my voice, but That's what I get for having so many books that I want to read. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you've read any of these books and if you think I should prioritize any of them. Let me know what's on your fall TBR. I'm so excited for this upcoming season of reading. I have so many reading vlogs I want to film. So make sure you are subscribed to my channel so that you don't miss out on any upcoming videos from me. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys in my next one so soon. Bye guys.